As the Essential Guide to Warfare makes clear, droids had long been used across the galaxy for war and combat, with examples going all the way back to the Rakkadan Infinite Empire at least 30 millennia before the Clone War. Although droids had never emerged as more effective than organic warriors throughout galactic history, due to the fact that they had always performed a wide range of duties, it was only logical that droids would eventually be used in the realm of warfare. However, the scale and vast output of the droid army used by the Separatists in the Clone War was something different entirely. And while we'll look at the logical reasons and progression that would result in the rise of the Separatist droid army, if galactic history was used as a guide, it was very unlikely that such a massive droid army would eventually emerge to produce such a devastating conflict. In this video expose, we'll look at why droid armies emerged in the era of the Clone War, first looking at why this era was so unique in its reliance on droids to carry out war, and then the circumstances the galaxy found itself in that would make droid armies extremely valuable, and really the only viable choice for the Separatist army. Again, war droids and combat droids had existed just as long as the Republic had, and for this reason, one might think that it was only a matter of time that a faction would come to rely almost entirely on droids to carry out large-scale warfare. In this way, the droid army of the Separatists doesn't appear improbable or inconceivable at all. Rather, it was the logical result of a galaxy that always turned to droids in some way during war. However, there were a number of reasons, and also truths about droid warfare, that made a droid army like the one that rose during the Clone War exceptionally unique and unlikely. First, it had always been recognized that war droids were never as effective in war as organics. Seen in the advantages enjoyed by the clone army, non-droids were clearly seen as being better at improvising and dealing with the constant, unavoidable fog of war, those situations where droids would be called on to deal with the unexpected. Because warring factions fighting for galactic control typically had access to large populations in which to recruit and conscript organic warriors, notably seen with factions like the Republic and Sith empires, war droids were called upon simply to bolster armies and perform tasks that were otherwise impossible for non-droids. But there was another important reason why droid armies were not normally adopted in a similar way as the Separatist droid army in the millennia and centuries leading up to the Clone War. This reasoning was underpinned by a series of shocks and uprisings that left the galaxy with a deep suspicion of droid armies, viewing them not just with loathing and hatred, but also horror and fear. Roughly 4,000 years before the Clone War, in 4015 BBY, a revolution known as the Great Droid Revolution erupted on Coruscant, when a Zerka Corporation prototype hunter-killer assassin droid known as HK-01 went rogue, and rebelled against its organic masters. Even worse, HK-01 was able to infiltrate the Republic's juggernaut war droids, convincing them to do the same as well. After 3 months of fighting, where droids were able to seize power on Coruscant and literally thousands of other worlds, turning war droids, industrial droids, and even the central computers of capital ships against the Republic, intervention by the Jedi ended the revolution. This sudden and horrific outbreak of violence completely changed the galaxy's view and approach to war droids. They were now approached with deep suspicion by default, and also subjected to a wide range of new regulations to prevent a similar situation from occurring. The age of war droids wasn't ended by any means, but there was an unmistakable change from this point forward. It took decades for war droids to again be used in any significant number, when the galaxy was engulfed by warfare through the Great Sith War, Mandalorian Wars, and the Jedi Civil War. And still, in many cases, particularly when used by the Republic, citizens hadn't forgotten the revolution of the previous generation, and looked upon the use of war droids, let alone droid armies, with fear and revulsion. To make matters even worse in this regard, despite the new regulations established only 60 years earlier, war droids would again go rogue shortly after the Jedi Civil War, where they seized control of the Gordian Reach, a section of space that included the Yavin system. On its own, liberating the Reach might have been exhausting enough, but with the Republic and Jedi having been decimated in the previous wars, having to then continue fighting against rogue war droids was a significant shock. The droids would eventually be destroyed and driven from the Gordian Reach, but the impact was significant. Just as in the aftermath of the Great Droid Revolution, the Republic responded with new sweeping restrictions on the use of war droids and the assembly of droid armies. Even more important for our video here, the galaxy turned not just on droids created for war, but droids in general. A wave of hatred of droids emerged in a significant way, even ending the ever-expanding acceptance of the recognition of droid rights that had been gathering momentum for millennia previously. Therefore, following the Jedi Civil War roughly 4,000 years before the Clone War, war droids were viewed with deep suspicion and regarded as always having the potential to turn against their own creators. Further, they were subjected to a wide range of regulations and restrictions, which not only limited their immediate development and use, but also innovation, ensuring that there would be no change to the wisdom that organics made more effective warriors than droids did. The decisions of this era would have a profound effect on the subsequent battlefields and wars between the Sith and Jedi over the next millennia during the new Sith Wars. So then how did the galaxy change so drastically in the era of the Clone War, where war droids weren't just again seen in significant numbers during warfare, but where droid armies were produced on a scale never seen before, and which underpinned a faction's entire war effort? To answer this question, it's necessary to look at the re-emergence of war droids, the rise of the Trade Federation, and the goals of the Sith. In the final centuries before the rise of Palpatine's galactic empire, the increasing power of the galaxy's megacorporations would renew the drive towards a reliance on war droids and droid armies, particularly as trade and commerce between the Outer Rim and galactic core expanded significantly. Droids were being created to carry out jobs of all kinds in this process, including the extraction, consumption, and transportation of resources. And so the next logical step was the creation of droids for the defense of trade installations and shipping convoys. Ironically, in this way then, war droids were seriously reintroduced to the galaxy in the 1,000-year period following the new Sith Wars that was defined by peace rather than warfare, where battle droids were sought as a means to further trade. No entity was more important in this regard than the Trade Federation, which by 250 BBY was no longer an organization committed to fighting abuse stemming from the galaxy's transportation megacorporations, but a powerful organization itself that attempted to create new commerce regions within the galaxy's farthest reaches and forge new trading routes. This task of course required the defense of transports and installations in these new locations, and military resources that would prevent their being preyed upon by raiders and pirates. In the centuries just prior to the Clone War, following the thousands of years of precedent established by that point, the Trade Federation did not seek to incorporate war droids or create droid armies. Their fleet was comprised of Kuat drive yards manufactured destroyers, frigates, and cruisers, and were led by non-droid naval officers who looked to eventually begin careers with their home planetary security forces or the Republic's judicials. Even more importantly, rather than produce battle droids, the Trade Federation trained their own organic soldiers on the planet of Balmorra, known as Trade Defense Force Marines. These Marines were committed to defending the Federation's trade convoys. As these practices became proud traditions over the subsequent decades, the ever-growing power of the Trade Federation, unchecked by the Republic Senate, and the vast increase in their wealth and resources through the newly established free trade zones within the Outer Rim, caused the Federation to begin campaigning for the right to create military capabilities of their own, completely separate from those of the Republic. It's here where the machinations of the Sith also need to be mentioned. For decades prior to the Clone War, Darth Sidious and his master Darth Plagueis had secretly been promoting and instructing the Geonosians and Colicoids to produce weapons, even before they had any knowledge they would be used in a direct war against the Jedi. It was merely beneficial for the Sith to promote war and instability where they could. In the same way, the Sith convinced the Trade Federation's Neimoidian Directorate that a massive secret military buildup was necessary. The relationship between Sidious and the Trade Federation was a self-perpetuating one in this regard. As Sidious was able to obtain for the Federation more Senate votes and influence as his Palpatine alter ego, the more the military resources requested by the Trade Federation were needed. Eventually, in the years prior to the Naboo crisis, as the lucrative free trade zones were threatened through the machinations of Sidious in manipulating then Supreme Chancellor Valorum, Sidious was able to convince the Trade Federation that rapid militarization was necessary to protect their interests. Under this new militarization scheme, the traditions of the Federation's Trade Defense Force collapsed in on itself. They could no longer rely on the training of their own Marines on Balmorra and had to automate the creation of a mass army. In other words, the Trade Federation had to turn to battle droids and rely on a droid army to achieve its goals. And it would be these battle droids that would replace the Marines that were so crucial during the earlier decades. Fortunately for the Trade Federation, like other mega corporations in the decades prior to the Clone War, they had already been increasingly deploying war droids to protect their interests alongside the use of Marines, a practice that went hand in hand with their reliance on droids to extract and transport resources to the core. A natural alliance was formed with the Intergalactic Banking Clan, Corporate Alliance, and Techno Union, sowing the seeds for the Separatist droid army to emerge during the Clone War. And when the Federation was ready to intensify its military buildup, enormous contracts were entered into with Bactoid and other corporations for the rapid creation of droid armies. But the decisions of the Trade Federation certainly ushered in a new era of reliance on droid armies that hadn't been seen for millennia, which spoke to the unique circumstances the galaxy found itself in during the decades prior to the Clone War. Droid armies provided the Trade Federation an answer to its unique lack of territory in which to recruit its own massive army, a reality due to its mega-corporation status and existence as an economic institution rather than political entity. It allowed it to rapidly militarize and grant itself a large degree of independence from the Republic, removing itself from the reliance it had once counted on from the Republic for centuries. And it allowed the Trade Federation to create a relatively cheap army in staggering numbers. It was this answer in the form of droid armies that not only fueled the Separatists during the war, but also brought about the successful completion of the Sith Grand Plan. So there we have it, the unlikely way in which droid armies emerged during the Clone War. Thank you very much to all of the Patreon members of Star Wars Reading Club, as your support is so greatly appreciated. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, you can find a link to it in the description below, along with all of our social media links and a link to our Star Wars gaming channel. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me... For HK Assassin Droids.